The galaxy was old, but the Aeternum were older. They had watched stars being born and watched them die. They had seen civilizations rise and fall like waves on a beach. They themselves never died. They could not die. Keeper Valis had lived for 500,000 years. He could not remember his childhood anymore. Those memories had faded away like old photographs left in the sun. But he remembered the important things. He remembered studying the ancient texts. He remembered watching whole species evolve and grow. He remembered everything that mattered to him. The Aeternum were the teachers of the galaxy. They were the peacekeepers. They kept records of everything that happened. They helped young species learn and grow. They were perfect in many ways. Their bodies healed from any wound. If their body was destroyed, their mind would transfer to a new one. Death was not something they understood. It was something that happened to others, to the lesser beings, to the temporary ones. Then the humans arrived. Valis stood in the great council chamber when the human ship first made contact. It was called the Remembrance, which was a strange name for a ship. The humans were short-lived creatures. Their records said they lived barely 100 years, sometimes less. They were fragile. They broke easily. They caught diseases. They aged and withered. The council found them fascinating in the way one might find insects fascinating. Interesting to study, but not to truly understand. Valis was chosen to be the human liaison. He would live among them, study them, and write reports. After 500,000 years, he welcomed something new to do. The same tasks became boring after the first 100,000 years. He boarded the Remembrance with curiosity. The ship was small compared to Aeternum vessels. Everything looked temporary, built to last decades instead of millennia. The crew members walked with purpose, always moving, always busy. Aeternum never rushed. Why would they? They had all the time in the universe. Captain Sarah Chun met him at the airlock. She was a middle-aged woman by human standards, with lines around her eyes and gray streaks in her dark hair. Valis had never seen an aging face before. All Aeternum looked young forever. "Welcome aboard, Keeper Valis," she said, extending her hand. He took it carefully. Her skin was warm and soft. Aeternum's skin felt different, harder somehow, designed to last forever. Hers felt fragile. "Thank you, Captain. I look forward to learning about your people." She smiled, and he noticed the emotion reached her eyes. Aeternum smiled too, but it was different. Calculated. Polite. Hers seemed real. She showed him around the ship. Everywhere he looked, he saw strange things. Photographs covered the walls. Images of people, places, moments frozen in time. He paused at one showing a group of crew members laughing together. "This is our memorial wall," Sarah explained. "Memorial?" Valis did not know the word. "These are crew members we've lost. People who died during our missions." Valis looked closer. Each photograph had dates underneath. Birth dates and death dates. Some people had lived 70 years. Some had lived only 25. One had lived 93. "Why do you display images of the dead?" he asked. Sarah touched one photograph gently. A young man with a bright smile. "So we remember them. So they're still with us in some way." Valis did not understand, but he made notes. Humans displayed images of the deceased. Some kind of primitive ritual, perhaps. Over the next weeks, he observed everything. The crew worked hard. They laughed often. They argued sometimes. They formed strong bonds with each other. They told stories during meals. They celebrated birthdays, which marked another year closer to death. Strange. He noticed they kept personal items. One engineer named Marcus Webb had a small box on his workstation. Inside were letters, a child's drawing, a worn photograph of a little girl. "My daughter, Marcus explained when he caught Valis looking. "She's 8 now. Growing up fast." "You seem sad about this," Valis observed. Marcus smiled that strange human smile that mixed happiness and sorrow. "Kids don't stay kids forever. I miss the baby she was, even though I love the girl she's becoming." Does that make sense? It did not make sense. Why mourn something that was still alive? But Valis noted it down. Then came the accident. It was a simple malfunction. A plasma conduit ruptured during a routine repair. Marcus was in the wrong place at the wrong time. The energy blast killed him instantly. Valis watched the crew react with shock. They seemed broken by this event. Captain Chun closed Marcus's eyes with gentle fingers and said words Valis would remember forever. "Rest easy, old friend." Valis stepped forward, confused. When will his regeneration begin? Do you need to transfer his consciousness? I can call for a Terminum medical technology. The silence that followed felt heavy. Every human face turned to him with expressions he could not read. Sarah's voice was quiet. "Valis, Marcus is gone. Humans don't regenerate. When we die, we die. It's permanent." Permanent? The word felt wrong in his mouth. Nothing was permanent. But surely you have backups? Memory storage? Some way to restore him? "No," she said simply. "This is what death means for us. Marcus is gone forever." Forever. Valis had lived for 500,000 years. Forever was a word he understood in theory. But this permanent ending, this cessation of existence? He watched as they prepared Marcus's body. They washed it with care. They dressed it in formal clothes. They placed it in a special chamber. The crew gathered around, and one by one, they spoke. They told stories about Marcus. Funny things he had said. Kind things he had done. Mistakes he had made. They cried. They laughed. They touched the chamber and said goodbye. Valis recorded everything, but he did not understand. His report that night was full of questions. Why did they treat the empty body with such care? Why did they speak to someone who could not hear? Why did they seem to find comfort in these rituals? That night, he walked through the ship's corridors. He passed the memorial wall again. Marcus's photograph had been added. A young man's face, smiling at a camera, frozen in a moment that would never come again. Beneath the photograph, someone had written words. A good engineer. A better friend. A wonderful father. He mattered. Valis stared at those words for a long time. He mattered. Past tense. As if mattering could end when life ended. For the first time in 500,000 years, Keeper Valis felt something he had no name for. A strange emptiness. A question he could not answer. He did not know it yet, but his education had begun. Valis requested permission to attend Marcus's memorial service. Captain Chun looked surprised but agreed. She warned him it might be emotional. He assured her that Aeternum did not feel strong emotions. They had learned to control such things over the millennia. He was wrong. The ceremony took place in the ship's observation deck. Stars spread out before them like diamonds on black cloth. The crew gathered in their formal uniforms. Marcus's body had been cremated, turned to ash, placed in a simple container. Sarah stood at the front and began to speak. Her voice was steady but sad. Marcus Webb was born on Earth 42 years ago. He grew up in New Seattle. He loved old engines and terrible jokes. He joined the space service because he wanted to see the stars. She paused, and Valis saw tears on her cheeks. Other crew members were crying too, but they were also smiling. Marcus fixed things, not just engines and conduits. He fixed bad days with his humor. He fixed arguments with his patience. He fixed loneliness with his friendship. One by one, crew members came forward. Each told a story. Marcus stayed up all night, helping me repair the nav system before my evaluation, one young officer said. He didn't have to. He just did. He sent messages to my kids every week, another crew member shared. He'd draw silly pictures for them, made them laugh. He taught me how to play chess, someone else said. I never won a single game, but he made losing fun. They laughed and cried at the same time. Valis watched, recording everything, trying to understand. They were celebrating someone who was gone. They were sharing memories of someone who would make no new memories. Then Sarah read a letter. Marcus had written it before the mission, a standard practice for dangerous assignments. A final letter, just in case. To my darling Emma, Sarah read, her voice shaking. If you're hearing this, Daddy had an accident. I'm sorry I won't be there to see you grow up. I'm sorry, I'll miss your birthdays and your graduation and your wedding. But I'm not sorry I came to the stars. This work matters. Keeping people safe matters. You matter most of all. The letter went on. Marcus told his daughter to be brave, to be kind, to look at the stars and know he was watching, to live fully and not be afraid. Valis felt something crack inside him. Some wall he had built over centuries. This man had known he might die, had written goodbye before it happened, had chosen to risk everything, even knowing he could lose everything. Why? The ceremony ended with Marcus's ashes being released into space near a nebula. The crew said it was his favorite one. He had painted pictures of it. Now he would be part of it forever, they said. His atoms would drift through the cosmos, becoming stardust again. Ashes to ashes, Sarah whispered. Dust to dust. After the ceremony, Valis could not stop thinking. He went to the ship's library and began to read human literature. Everything he found was touched by death. Shakespeare wrote about mortality. Ancient poets contemplated their final days. Philosophers argued about the meaning of finite existence. One human named Camus wrote that humans must imagine themselves happy, even though they will die. Another named Epicurus said death is nothing to fear because when you are alive, death is not there, and when death is there, you are not. Humans had spent thousands of years thinking about death, creating art about death, finding meaning in death. The Aeternum had never thought about it at all. Valis found Captain Chun in her quarters late one night. She was looking at photographs. Her wife and son, he learned, both dead, killed in a colony attack 10 years ago. I'm sorry for your loss, Valis said, using the phrase he had learned. Sarah smiled sadly. Thank you. It gets easier, but it never stops hurting. Why do you keep their images? Does it not cause you pain? Yes, she admitted. But it also brings joy. I remember the good times. I remember loving them and being loved. That matters more than the pain. I do not understand, Valis confessed. You celebrate loss. You honor absence. You speak to the dead as if they can hear. Sarah poured tea, a human ritual he had observed. She offered him a cup. He took it, though Adenum did not need to drink. We don't celebrate loss, Valis. We celebrate what we had. Marcus lived 42 years. That's all he got. But in those 42 years, he loved his daughter, helped his friends, did work he believed in, saw beautiful things. His life had meaning because it was his and his alone, because he chose how to spend his limited time. But it ended, Valis said. Everything ends. That's what makes it precious. If Marcus had forever, would he have written that letter to his daughter? Would he have stayed up all night to help a colleague? Would he have painted the nebula? Maybe not. Maybe he would have said, I'll do it tomorrow, forever. Valis sipped the tea. It was warm and sweet. He would never have tried it if he had infinite tomorrows to decide. How do you live knowing you will end? He asked quietly. Sarah looked at her family's photograph. We live because we will end. We love deeply because we won't have forever. We create things because we want to leave something behind. We say, I love you, because we might not get another chance. Before Valis could respond, his communication device activated. An emergency signal from the Aternum homeworld. Urgent. Critical. He excused himself and took the call in private. The face of High Keeper Meridian appeared, and Valis was shocked. Meridian was ancient, over 2 million years old. She had always been calm, composed, eternal. Now she looked afraid. Keeper Valis, something is happening. Something impossible. What is it? We're calling it the Fade. It started in the outer colonies 3 months ago. Ahaternum are losing their regeneration. Their bodies are failing. Valis, our people are dying. The word sounded wrong coming from her. Ahaternum did not die. That was the one constant truth of the universe. How many? He asked. Thousands so far. Millions projected within a year. We've never faced anything like this. Our scientists are working on a cure, but initial estimates say it will take 10,000 years to develop. 10,000 years? Once, that would have seemed like nothing. Now, Valis understood what Sarah had tried to teach him. Time mattered when you did not have enough of it. What should I do? He asked. Meridian's face was grave. Continue your work. Study the humans. They understand death. Maybe they can help us. The transmission ended. Valis sat in silence, the teacup still warm in his hands. For 500,000 years, he had existed without fear. Death was for other species. The temporary ones. The fragile ones thought now death was coming for the Aeternum, and they had no idea how to face it. He thought of Marcus's letter to his daughter, written before death, preparing for it, accepting it. He thought of Sarah keeping photographs of her dead family, finding joy in memories. He thought of the memorial service, the tears and laughter mixed together. Humans had lived with death since the beginning. They had learned to find meaning despite it, or perhaps because of it. The Aternum would need to learn quickly. Their forever was ending, and they did not know how to say goodbye. Valis made a decision. He would ask the humans for help. Not to cure the Fade, to learn what the humans had always known. He would learn how to die. The Fade spread through the Aeternum worlds like fire through dry grass. Every day brought new reports. More dying. More panic. More fear. The Aternum had no framework for this. Their entire civilization was built on the foundation of endless time. They made plans that took centuries to complete. They started projects knowing they would see them finished. They never said goodbye because there was no such thing. Now, everything was crumbling. Valis watched the reports from the Remembrance. He saw footage of Aternum cities descending into chaos. Some of his people locked themselves in their homes, refusing to acknowledge what was happening. Others destroyed their own work, saying if they could not live forever to see it completed, why bother? Some went mad, their minds unable to process the concept of their own ending. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Valis attended via hologram. Every species in the galaxy had sent representatives. The chamber buzzed with worried voices. High Keeper Meridian addressed the assembly. Her voice was hollow, empty of the authority it once held. The Fade cannot be stopped with our current technology. We estimate 97% of the Aelnum population will die within 2 years. We request all galactic resources be directed toward finding a cure. The council debated for hours. The mathematics were simple and cruel. Even with every species helping, even with unlimited resources, a cure would take thousands of years to develop. The Aternum did not have thousands of years anymore. A delegate from the Zephyr Coalition spoke carefully. Perhaps the Aternum should focus their remaining time on preparing for the inevitable, rather than denying it. Meridian's response was sharp. You speak of surrender. The Aeternum do not surrender. I speak of acceptance, the delegate replied. Every species in this chamber has faced extinction threats. We survive by adapting, by accepting reality and working within it. We have no experience with extinction, Meridian said. We have no experience with death itself. We do not know how to accept the unacceptable. The chamber fell silent. What could anyone say? The galaxy's eldest race, the wisest beings in known space, were like children facing their first nightmare. Captain Chen squeezed Valis' shoulder after the session ended. Come with me? She led into the ship's medical bay. Dr. Rashid was waiting, a gentle man with kind eyes. Keeper Valis, he said quietly. Captain Chen asked me to examine you. With your permission? Valis agreed. He stood still while the doctor ran scans. He watched the readings appear on the screen, seeing numbers he had never associated with himself before. Cellular degradation. Regeneration failure. Neural pathway decay. You have the fade, Dr. Rashid said gently. Early stages, but progressing. I estimate you have perhaps a year. Maybe less. A year. 365 days. 52 weeks. 12 months. It sounded like nothing. It sounded like forever. Valis sat down slowly. His hands were shaking. When had they started shaking? I am dying, he said, testing the words. Yes, the doctor confirmed. I will cease to exist. Yes, everything I am will end. Yes, Valis looked at his hands. 500,000 years contained in these hands. Memories, knowledge, experiences. All of it would be gone, erased, as if he had never existed. I'm afraid, he whispered. It was the first time in 500,000 years he had felt real fear. Captain Chen knelt beside him. Of course you are. Fear is normal. It's healthy. How do I stop being afraid? You don't. You learn to live with the fear. You learn to find meaning anyway. Over the next weeks, Valis felt his body changing. Small things at first. He got tired more easily. His thoughts became less sharp. He needed to sleep, something ad eternum rarely did. Food tasted different. Colors seemed brighter. Everything felt more intense, more real, more urgent. He began to understand what Sarah had tried to teach him. One morning, he woke up and realized he had dreamed. Eternum did not dream. Their minds were too organized, too controlled. But he had dreamed of his childhood, memories he thought were lost forever. He had dreamed of his first teacher, an ancient Eternum who had died in an accident millions of years ago. He had not thought of her in ages. Why now? Why remember her when he was dying? Because, he realized, she mattered. She had taught him, shaped him, influenced who he became. Her death had seemed meaningless then, just an unfortunate accident. Now he understood. She had lived, and her living had meaning because it had affected others. He asked Sarah a question that had been forming in his mind. In 500,000 years, what have I left behind? Sarah did not answer immediately. She thought about it carefully. What do you mean? Marcus left his daughter. He left friends who loved him. He left paintings of nebulas. What have I left? Who will remember me? What did I create that mattered? Sarah's silence was his answer. He had existed for 500,000 years and left nothing. He had observed, recorded, catalogued. But he had never truly created. He had never truly connected. He had never committed to anything because he always had more time. He had been a ghost, watching life without living it. I need to speak with my people, he said suddenly. Sarah helped him arrange a transmission to the Acternum homeworld. When Highkeeper Meridian appeared, Valis barely recognized her. She looked older somehow, though that should have been impossible. The weight of mortality was aging her in ways time never had. "Keeper Valis, do you have news of a cure?" "No," he said. "I have a different request. I need humanity's help. To develop medical technology?" "No, to learn how to die." Meridian stared at him. "What? We are dying whether we like it or not. Fighting it is futile. But we do not know how to face death. We do not know how to find meaning in our remaining time. We do not know how to grieve or let go or say goodbye. The humans know all of this. They have always known. We need them to teach us. You want us to surrender?" Meridian's voice was sharp. "I want us to live," Valis said firmly. "We have been existing for millions of years. But humans, with their brief decades, live more fully than we ever have. They create. They love. They build legacies. They matter. We need to learn how to matter in the time we have left." Meridian was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, "What would you have us do?" "Ask humanity for teachers. Counselors, philosophers, artists, anyone who understands mortality. Bring them to our worlds. Let them show us how to make our final days meaningful." "And you? What will you do?" Valis looked at Captain Chun, at the crew of the Remembrance, at the memorial wall with all those photographs. "I will stay here and learn. I will write down what I discover. I will create something that outlasts me. I will make my life matter while I still can." Meridian considered this. For the first time since the fade began, Valis saw something other than fear in her eyes. He saw hope. "Very well. I will contact Earth. We will ask for their help." The transmission ended. Valis sat back, exhausted. The simple conversation had tired him. His body was failing faster. Now Sarah handed him water. He drank it gratefully. "What will you create?" she asked. "A book," he said. "A guide for immortal species on how to face mortality. Everything I learn, everything the ad eternum discover, written down for others who might face this someday. That's a good legacy." Valis smiled. And for the first time, he understood why humans smiled through tears. It was possible to be sad and hopeful at the same time, to grieve and still find joy, to face death and still choose to live. He had 500,000 years of existence behind him, and perhaps 1 year of life ahead. He intended to make it count. The human ships arrived at the ad eternum homeworld 3 weeks later. Not warships or trading vessels, but something the eternum had never seen before. Hospital ships, counseling centers, mobile classrooms. They brought doctors who specialized in end-of-life care, psychologists who understood grief, artists and musicians, priests, rabbis, imams, monks from every earth religion, philosophers and poets, regular people who had lost loved ones and learned to carry on. They came to teach the immortals how to die at first. The Eternum resisted. Highkeeper Meridian met with the human delegation in the Grand Archive, a building that had stood for 2 million years. She greeted them formally, maintaining dignity even as her world crumbled. "We appreciate your assistance," she said stiffly. "Though I confess we do not understand what you can teach us that our superior intellect has not already grasped." The head of the human delegation was an elderly woman named Dr. Elizabeth Okafor. She had white hair and warm brown eyes that had seen much sorrow. She smiled gently at Meridian's words. "Understanding death intellectually and accepting it emotionally are very different things," she said. "You may know you are dying, but do you know how to grieve? How to prioritize your remaining time? How to say goodbye to those you love? How to leave something meaningful behind?" Meridian had no answer. Dr. Okafor continued. "Every human learns these things. We learn by watching our grandparents age, by losing childhood pets, by attending funerals, by facing our own mortality every single day. It's not about intelligence. It's about experience. And humans have millions of years of collective experience with death. The teaching began slowly. Humans spread across the Aeternum worlds, setting up grief counseling centers. They held workshops on legacy planning, on creative expression, on making peace with the past. They taught meditation and prayer. They shared stories of their own losses and how they survived them. Many Aeternum refused to participate. They locked themselves away, denying reality. But others, desperate and afraid, began to listen. Valis worked with Captain Chun directly. She became his teacher in ways he had never been taught before. First lesson, she said, make a list of regrets. I do not understand the purpose. You have 500,000 years of existence. Surely there are things you wish you had done differently. We need to identify them so you can find peace with them. Valis began to write. The list grew longer than he expected. He regretted not maintaining relationships with other Aeternum he had known. He regretted never creating art, only studying it. He regretted not telling his first teacher how much she meant to him before she died. He regretted decades spent in isolation, believing he had infinite time to rejoin society later. So many regrets, he whispered. Good, Sarah said. Now we work through them. Some you can fix. Others you can forgive yourself for. All of them you can learn from. She taught him to write letters to people from his past. Aeternum he had not spoken to in thousands of years. He apologized, expressed gratitude, sought forgiveness. Many did not respond, lost in their own fear. But some did. And those responses felt like gifts. Second lesson, Sarah said. Create something that will outlast you. Valis began his book in earnest. He wrote about what he was learning, about the difference between existing and living, about how limitations create meaning, about the beauty in temporary things. He wrote late into each night, racing against the clock his body had become. He also tried other forms of creation. He attempted to paint and discovered he was terrible at it. His first painting of the stars looked like a child's scribbles. Sarah hung it on her wall anyway. It's perfect, she said. It is objectively poor quality. It's perfect because you made it. Because you tried something new. Because 500,000 years of existence and you finally took a risk. He composed music with the ship's synthesizer. The melody was simple, melancholic, beautiful in its sadness. He called it The Fade and shared it with other Aeternum. Many began playing it at their own gatherings. It became something shared, something communal. Third lesson, Sarah said. Learn to say goodbye. This was the hardest lesson. Aeternum had no traditions for parting. They said, until next time, casually, knowing there would always be a next time. Now there would not be. Sarah taught him to be present in his final conversations, to look people in the eye, to say what needed saying, to express love and gratitude without assuming there would be another chance. He called his colleague, Keeper Thane, whom he had worked with for 10,000 years. They had not spoken in 50 years, a mere blink for Aeternum. Both had the fade now. I wanted to tell you that you mattered to me, Valis said. Your friendship made those centuries better. I should have told you before. Thane's voice was thick with emotion. And you mattered to me, old friend. They spoke for hours, remembering shared experiences, laughing at old mistakes, crying for the future they would not have. When they finally said goodbye, it hurt. But it also felt complete. Across Aeternum worlds, similar scenes played out. Humans taught them to hold memorial services for the dying while they were still alive. Living funerals, Dr. Okafor called them. The dying Aeternum sat while friends and family spoke about their impact, their meaning, their legacy. Many Aeternum wept for the first time in millions of years. they learned to create monuments to the dead. Where once they had archives of pure data, they now built gardens with names carved in stone. They planted trees for the departed. They painted murals. They composed songs. The Aeternum began to transform. Artists emerged from a species that had only curated art, never created it. Musicians composed symphonies about loss and love. Poets wrote verses about the beauty of finite existence. Architects designed buildings meant to last only centuries, but with breathtaking beauty. For the first time in millions of years, the Aeternum were truly alive. Valis watched his people change. He documented everything in his book. He interviewed dying Aeternum about what they were learning. Their answers were profound. I feel more alive now in my final year than I did in a million years before, one said. I never knew my work mattered until I knew I would not finish it, another shared. Now every equation I solve feels important. I told my family I loved them. I had never said those words before. Why bother when you have forever? An old keeper confessed through tears. What a waste of time. What a waste of love. High Keeper Meridian began holding public gatherings. She spoke about her own fears, her own regrets. The leader who had seemed untouchable, eternal, became human in her vulnerability. We spent millions of years preparing for every possibility except this one, she told her people. We were so busy being immortal that we forgot to live. The humans, with their brief candles of life, burned brighter than our eternal flames ever did. 6 months into his final year, Valis completed the first draft of his book. He called it the Book of Endings, a guide for immortal species facing mortality. It was raw, honest, painful, and hopeful. He shared it with Sarah. She read it in one sitting, tears streaming down her face. It's beautiful, she said. You've captured something essential. Not just about dying, but about living. I learned from the best teacher, Valis said. A species that faces death daily and still chooses hope. Sarah hugged him. He had learned about hugs from humans. This gesture of comfort, of connection, of wordless support. He hugged her back, this fragile human who would outlive him. Thank you, he whispered. For everything. Thank you for letting us teach you, she replied. You've taught us something too. What could immortals teach humans about death? That it's never too late to change. Never too late to create meaning. Never too late to truly live. Valis smiled. He was dying. His body was failing more each day. But for the first time in 500,000 years, he felt truly alive. He had finally learned what it meant to be mortal. And in learning that, he had discovered what it meant to matter. The final gathering of the Aeternum took place 1 year after the Fade began. Where once there had been trillions, now only thousands remained. They met in their ancient capital city, but it looked nothing like it had before. Sterile. Perfect buildings were now covered in art. Murals stretched across walls, painted by dying hands that had never created before. Sculptures filled the plazas. Music drifted through the streets. Compositions written by Aeternum, who had discovered melody in their final days. Gardens bloomed where cold stone had stood, each plant dedicated to someone who had died. The city had become a living memorial, a celebration of life by those facing death. Keeper Valis stood in the grand archive, looking at the changes. He could barely walk now. His body was failing rapidly. Dr. Rashid had told him he had days, maybe a week at most. But he had finished his work. The Book of Endings was complete, translated into every galactic language, ready to guide others who might face what the Aeternum had faced. High Keeper Meridian found him there. She looked old now, truly old. The Fade had taken her strength, but it had given her something else. Peace. Acceptance. Grace. The humans are leaving tomorrow, she said quietly. They say their work here is done. It is, Valis agreed. We know how to die now. The rest we must do ourselves. I wanted to thank you, Meridian said, for having the courage to ask for help, for teaching us that wisdom sometimes means admitting ignorance. I learned that from a human captain who showed kindness to a confused immortal, Valis replied. They stood together in comfortable silence. Once, silence between Aeternum had been empty, hollow. Now it felt full of unspoken understanding. I am afraid, Meridian admitted. So am I. But I am also grateful. These final months have meant more than the millions of years before them. Valis understood perfectly. That evening, a ceremony was held. Not a funeral, but a celebration. The remaining Aeternum gathered in the central plaza. Humans came too. Standing beside the dying immortals they had taught and befriended. Captain Sarah Chun stood next to Valis. She held his hand, which trembled with weakness. He was grateful for her presence. High Keeper Meridian addressed the assembly. Her voice was weak but clear. We are the Aeternum, the Eternal Ones. But we are eternal no longer. In days or weeks or months, we will all be gone. Our species will end. She paused, looking at the faces around her. Faces showing fear and sadness, but also peace and even joy. We spent millions of years believing our immortality made us special. We were wrong. Our immortality made us complacent. We existed, but did not live. We observed, but did not participate. We had forever, and did nothing with it. She gestured to the art covering the city. Look at what we created in our final year. Look at what we built when we finally understood that time was precious. Look at the love we shared when we knew we would not have another chance. This year, we lived. This year, we mattered. Applause erupted, mixed with tears. Aeternum embraced each other, no longer afraid to show emotion. They had spent so long being perfect. Now they were finally real. One by one, Aeternum came forward to share their stories. What they had learned. What they had created. Who they wanted to be remembered as. I painted every day for the last 6 months, one ancient being said. I had never painted before. I thought I was too logical for art, but I painted sunsets and loved ones and dreams. I left behind 200 paintings. They are not perfect, but they are mine. I wrote letters to everyone I loved, another shared. I said things I had been too proud to say before. I apologized for old hurts. I expressed gratitude. I said, I love you, for the first time in a million years. I spent my final months teaching young species, a third said. I gave away all my knowledge freely. I wanted to leave something behind. Not just data, but wisdom earned through experience. The stories continued late into the night. Stories of creation, connection, courage, and love. The Aeternum had finally learned what it meant to live fully. As the gathering ended, Dr. Elizabeth Okafor approached the stage. This elderly human who had taught an entire species how to face death. You taught us too, she said simply. You taught us that it is never too late to change. That wisdom can come from accepting help. That creating meaning is always possible, even in the darkest times. We will carry these lessons back to Earth. Your legacy will live through us. The next morning, Valis woke up feeling weaker than ever. He knew his time was close. Sarah came to his quarters, as she did every morning now. How are you feeling? She asked. Ready, he said. Afraid, but ready. She helped him to the observation deck. He wanted to see the stars one more time. They sat together in silence, watching the cosmos turn. Will it hurt? He finally asked. The dying? Maybe a little, Sarah said honestly. But you will not be alone. I will be here, and you will leave knowing you mattered. How can you be sure I mattered? Your book will guide others for generations. Your music is being played across the galaxy. You changed how an entire species faces death. You changed me, Valis. You showed me that even beings who seem perfect can learn and grow. That is a gift." Valis felt tears on his face. He had learned to cry from humans. It felt good to cry. "I am grateful," he said, "for this year, for knowing you, for learning what life truly means before mine ended." Hours passed. His breathing became labored. His vision dimmed. But he felt no panic, only peace. Sarah held his hand and told him about the stars, about the nebulas he had painted, about the beauty of the universe that would continue without him. "Thank you," he whispered. His voice was barely audible now, "for teaching us the most important thing we never learned, that life without death is existence without meaning. That goodbye, painful as it is what makes hello so beautiful." Sarah squeezed his hand. "You are going to be remembered, Valis, not for living 500,000 years, but for how you lived your last one." He smiled. His breathing slowed, stopped. Sarah closed his eyes gently and whispered the words she had said to Marcus, the words humans had said for centuries, the words the Asternum had finally learned to understand. "Rest easy, old friend." The years passed. One by one, the Asternum died. Each death was mourned. Each life was celebrated. They died with dignity, surrounded by love, knowing they had mattered. The last Asternum, an artist named Soline, died in a garden she had planted. Her final painting showed the sunrise over her homeworld. She left it to the galaxy with a simple note, so others remember that even ending can be beautiful. The Asternum worlds became monuments. Their cities were preserved as museums. Their art galleries attracted visitors from across the galaxy. Their libraries held not just dry records, but stories, poems, music, and wisdom earned through facing death. The Book of Endings became required reading for all spacefaring species. Valis's words guided countless beings through grief and loss. His final lesson endured, that mortality gives meaning, that finite time makes every moment matter, and that the truest immortality is in the memories and legacy we leave behind. 100 years after the last Asternum died, a memorial was unveiled in their capital city. It showed Captain Sarah Chun and Keeper Valis, hands clasped, looking at the stars together. The inscription read, "They taught us how to live. We taught them how to die." In this exchange, both species found meaning. Sarah Chun attended the unveiling. She was very old now, her hair white, her movements slow. But her eyes were still bright with memory. She placed flowers at the base of the statue. Real flowers, grown from seeds the Asternum had planted in their final year. "Goodbye, friends," she whispered. "And thank you." A young child tugged at her mother's sleeve. Why did they have to die? The mother knelt down, thinking carefully about her answer. She had read the Book of Endings in school. She had learned from the Asternum's sacrifice. "They died because everything does," she said gently. "But that is not sad. They died after living fully. They died knowing they mattered. They died having created beauty and love and meaning. Death is not the tragedy. Wasting life is the tragedy. But why do we die?" The child persisted. The mother smiled, a sad smile full of human wisdom earned through countless generations of loss and love, so that we remember to live. She took her daughter's hand, and together they walked through the memorial garden. All around them, the legacy of the Asternum bloomed. Art and music, wisdom and beauty, love and meaning. The immortals had died, but what they learned in dying would live forever. High above, the stars continued their eternal dance. And somewhere among them, in the atoms of nebulas and the dust of space, the Asternum remained. Not as conscious beings, but as part of the cosmos they have finally learned to truly appreciate. They had taught the galaxy that endings give meaning to beginnings. That goodbye makes hello precious. That death, accepted with grace, is not the end of meaning, but the culmination of it. The Eternal Ones had learned mortality's greatest lesson. Life is not measured in years, but in moments that matter. And in their final year, the Aeternum had lived more fully than in all their millions of years before. They had finally understood what humans had always known, that to truly live, one must first accept death, and in accepting it, find meaning in every precious, fleeting moment.